thought that Hollywood was joking when they would have that trope of somebody walking into a bar and like the piano player would stop playing and everyone would look up and they'd be like, what's this? Who's this person walking in? But my wife and I were invited to a wedding in this tiny town in Indiana, right? And so we fly from Los Angeles to, I don't know where we were, Indianapolis, rent a car, get in the car, drive to this small little town. We go into this diner, this breakfast diner, to get a late breakfast. And literally the music got turned down and all the people looked over at the door, and everyone in the room, I swear to God, everyone in the room had a flannel shirt on and trucker hat with the mesh cap in the back, right?
Yep.
And I looked at my wife and I and realized completely by accident, just city living, we were both wearing all black, both of us, all black.
Oh my God.
And we walked into this tiny little out of the way Indiana cafe. Everyone's wearing flannel and trucker hats. And they're like, can you imagine what we look like? We look like the Matrix walking into this small little cafe.
Yeah. They were probably scared you were going to take over.
So it's the one time in my life where I was like, God, you really can stop a parade just by how you look when you walk into a cafe.
That's amazing. Well, I'm sure Gloria is used to walking into a room and every head turns, but how did that feel for you?
And on that note, I say hello, everybody, and welcome to ComicLab, the show about digging into your friend with the worst cut ever and making comics.
And making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, the author of the Webcomics Handbook and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his pal Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of the comics documentary Stripped.
And this week's hour of comics advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. And a reminder that you could be watching this show live right now with patreon.com/comiclab. The Live Gab group can watch the show streaming every week. And there is a concurrent chat going on with everybody talking with each other as we're talking. And we try to answer questions before, during, and after the show as a little extra bonus for everyone joining us over at patreon.com/comiclab. And Brad, who is our sponsor for this week?
Oh gosh, I'm excited once again to welcome back our sponsor, DreamHost. I want you to put this on your list of things to check out. It's dreamhost.com/comiclab. Dave and I have been talking about for a long time, since the beginning of the show, about the importance of owning and controlling your own work. And you really don't own and control your own work until you own where that work is being posted. And that means having your own website. I know it sounds counterintuitive, especially if you're under 40 years old, but trust me, we know what we're talking about on this one.
Absolutely. And DreamHost has gone the extra mile for Comic Lab listeners. They've set up two plans. There's a shared starter plan, $2.59 a month on dreamhost.com/comiclab. And then there's a shared unlimited plan for $3.95 a month. By the way, these prices are fantastic. So for a start, especially if you are starting up for the price of a cup of coffee, you've got your by the way, in LA, a cup of coffee is like $4 now. So for less than a cup of coffee in Los Angeles anyway, you can have your website up and running with one-click WordPress install. It is a fantastic option for you.
And much, much cheaper than a dozen eggs anywhere in the country right now.
By the way, speaking of the egg shortage, not to jump in on this, but did you notice that Costco now has duck eggs and quail eggs because there's so few chicken eggs?
Oh my gosh.
Not to jump in on our DreamHost sponsorship, but the Costco is now selling quail eggs. I never would have thought that.
Well, there is another similarity between eggs and DreamHost, and that is this. If you're just starting out, if you're in the nascent phase, you don't even have a website right now, this is the perfect time for pulling the trigger on something like dreamhost.com/comiclab, because there's no pressure. You can take your time. You can build it slowly. And if you get in trouble, I'm telling you, there's nobody better than the customer support at DreamHost. They are beyond compare for anything. I've been using DreamHost for well over 10 years at this point, and a lot of it is because of their customer support.
Absolutely. So you're going to want to head over to dreamhost.com/comiclab and take advantage of their zero risk 97-day money back guarantee that you will like your hosting at dreamhost.com/comiclab.
Dave, do you see this big smile on my face? This smile right here. Do you see the smile on my face?
I do see that smile, and I know why that smile is there. I share that smile.
That's right. We're smiling over here because we're joined by our good friend, Kevin McShane. You can see Kevin's work over at kevincomics.com. And Kevin's a cartoonist from way back. We've known Kevin for years and years and years. And we are absolutely thrilled to have him on the show today. Kevin, welcome.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.
You bet.
It's great to be back.
I got to tell you, Kevin, one of my favorite bits, and if someone is new to the podcast, one of my favorite bits that we ever had on the show was the one where we were talking about a 1920s weight loss mechanism as though it were being marketed today. What was it called? The jiggler?
It was the jiggler?
The jiggler without the E at the end. Yeah. And so if you haven't looked for it, go back. It's way back in the archives, probably about 3 years back now. Look for the Kevin McShane episode. And we had like a 5-minute run on this device called the jiggler. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
It's great. And there's been times over the years where I've seen similar things in like novelty catalogs and stuff like that. And I will always send it to the two of you. It exists. They made the jiggler.
The jiggler is real.
More jiggler news.
So we both, Brad and I, met Kevin and Kevin us, I think at Comic-Con maybe 18 years ago, 16 years ago, something like that. Is that right?
I think it was Baltimore Comic-Con.
Oh, it was Baltimore Comic-Con. Okay, yeah.
You might be right about that.
We all immediately just had the same energy in terms of comedy and joking around. And Kevin, I got to tell you, in recent years, you have made, I think, sort of a renewed push in your cartooning with a whole new avenue of more personal comics or comics coming out of a personal vein. And so for the benefit of folks that haven't seen it yet, how would you describe your comics currently?
Oh, geez. I don't know if I have like a succinct pitch. It's basically kind of quasi-autobiographical comics about me and a fictional bird that can talk.
So now that was the first question I had on my list to ask you. So you don't own a parrot in real life? This is just fictional.
I do not. I think parrots are hysterical. I think they're funny. My partner and I keep sending each other TikToks of various talking birds and whatnot. And so when I was trying to think of like a companion character, I was like, why not a bird?
It is nice to see somebody, stepping away from the traditional cat and dog type of thing.
I was going to say anything to make it not Garfield.
Yes.
Yeah. And dogs are the same way. It's kind of like, people put dogs in their strips and it's like, this dog again.
I got to say this, though, as a fellow drawer of cartoon birds, is that we have made a hard road for ourselves in that the beak is unmalleable for a cartoon format that loves malleability. And like the beak doesn't give you anything to work with. You got nothing there,
Yep, exactly.
So it's all wing flapping and yeah, exactly. Big cheeks.
That's why I draw the mouth and then just draw the beak over it. That's my tip.
It becomes like this Jimmy Durante nose over the mouth. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But so how did you settle on this format of you and the bird and I mean there are various occasional walk-ins that will be repeating, I've noticed, but for the most part it is you and the bird. How did you come to settle on that format?
I don't know that there was any type of like conscious thought behind it. I think you're both giving me a lot more credit than is necessary. It's really just I wanted to make comics. I just looked at my own life and just went from there, honestly. And it's just easier for me to like put myself in it because it feels more authentic that way.
Yeah. Well, let me ask a more serious and deeper question then, and not to put you on the spot, but I feel like for the better part of a decade, you wanted to be cartooning, but you were in search of a title. And I think eventually, did you just kind of allow yourself like, no, I'm going to do semi-autobiographical, and that's fine. That's an outlet for me. That's great.
Well, let me give you the short story, and there's a Brad Geiger compliment in the middle of it.
Well, then by all means, go right ahead with your story, Kevin. We are all ears, aren't we, David?
Did you see that puffer fish of a chest expand as soon as you said Brad Geiger?
He got very excited. He got very excited.
Yes.
So my comics journey was I started off in the early aughts like the rest of us, but instead of being online, I decided that I was going to do a traditional indie comic book that I was going to sell print only through Diamond, go that entire route. And I wish I had met you guys earlier because I feel like you could have taken me to the side and been like, look, don't do that. And I would have saved a lot of time and effort. But I was like, you know what? It worked for Eastman and Laird. I'm going to do it too. And so I put out a book called Toopy Doops, which was based on my college strip. And basically just, it didn't go anywhere for, a myriad of reasons. But it got my foot in the door. And when it kind of petered out, I really kind of went to a dark place where I was just like, I don't know if I want to do comics anymore. And I didn't draw another comic for at least another 7 or 8 years, maybe even longer. But I always had the itch. I was always like, I want to get back into it because it's something that I love. And it took a morning with Brad Geiger at a diner.
Is this at Little Pete's? Is this at Little Pete's? Oh.
So I was visiting Philly, and I just hit up Brad and I said, hey, do you want to go get breakfast? And he was like, I know the perfect place. It's this great little diner. Meet me there. And so we met there, and we were just chatting, and Brad was just being conversational, asking me, so like, are you thinking about making comics again? And I just kind of, just told him that like I wasn't really feeling it. And he was like, well, what's holding you up and what not? And so I just went into this litany of things of like, oh, I feel like it's not good enough. And when I sit with a joke for too long, it's not funny to me anymore, and blah, blah, blah. And Brad, to his credit, just sat there quietly and listened and nodded his head a little bit. And the more I talked, the more I heard myself, and the more I realized that I was just, being my own worst enemy. And so in kind of Brad Geiger kind of Zen master way, he kind of like reflected myself back to me. And I remember leaving that breakfast, which was great. What is it? Low Phil's?
One of my favorite places.
In Philly? Yeah. It's great. I remember leaving that breakfast and going and talking to my partner and just being like, I got to start making comics again. This is bullshit. And so then then I just got a lot less precious about like, oh, well, what's the format? What's the story? Everything like that. And I was like, I'll just make comics and I'll just figure it out organically. And that's kind of been my approach ever since, where I'm just like the bird in my strip doesn't have a name.
Right.
He's been a character in the strip for almost 3 years now. He still doesn't have a name because like nothing's really like jumping out to me,
Yeah.
And so, I have a couple other like ancillary characters and stuff like that, but I've never really sat down to kind of like define what the deal is with my strip because I don't want to hem myself in too much.
Right.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter what the parrot's name is at this point. It really doesn't. It's totally off to the side kind of stuff.
Well, that's not unlike how I started with Drive, in that for a couple of months there, I was like, I need to figure out all the details. How's this going to be printed? What's the website going to be? And then I was just like, no, I'm just going to start it, put it up on Sheldon, for God's sakes, on Saturdays where no one was reading, and just start. And there's a lot of argument to be made that sometimes just starting is the best way to go, because like you will figure it out as you go. You're a smart guy and you'll figure it out. But it has been a dang. One of the things that I love about your cartooning as you've worked on this for the last couple of years is, and I hope you take this for the huge compliment that I intend, your facial expressions and your ability to capture hyper specific microseconds of a facial expression are among some of the best I've ever seen. Do you do a lot of mirror work? Is it photography? How do you capture that moment of a very specific moment on a facial expression?
Well, first of all, thank you. And second of all, it's really easy. Like I use myself as a reference, but instead of mirror work, I will just take a selfie of myself making whatever the face is. Then I'll flip it because your selfies are flipped. And then I'll just draw from that. So I actually have on my camera roll a ridiculous amount of me just making like all of these ridiculous faces. And I was thinking about actually doing like a subscription Patreon type thing of just those photos.
Just the faces.
Yeah. And then the panel that, that it ended up being. And I have no idea if anyone would actually pay for that, but, $2 a month.
There's only one way to find out. That's one thing that I'm really kind of envious of you for, and that is you.
My face? I get it.
Yeah,
I get it.
honestly. And also the stuff that comes out of that face, in that you have amazing ideas that it's kind of I wish I would have thought of that stuff. You had a series, and you still do it, from what I see on Twitter from time to time, bad caricatures.
Yes. Yeah.
This is one of my favorite things that you do of all time, where you literally will take a picture of two people or one person and then draw the worst caricature in the world. But then that's the whole point, is you're not even trying to pass this off as a good caricature. The whole idea is that it's a bad caricature. Where does stuff like that come from?
So that specifically came from the very last SPX that I went to. Talking about my first book and how it kind of died. I kept going back to SPX even though I didn't have new books or anything like that, because it's that whole the gambler's fallacy of just like, you know what, I'm gonna keep going. And the last time that I went to SPX, which was 2013, I think, no one was buying my stuff. And so it got to be like Saturday afternoon, and I was just getting really depressed. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to start drawing bad caricatures of people who come by. And so I made a quick little sign that was like, bad caricatures, $1. And somebody came up and did it. And it was just like, and then I realized that like, oh, if I include an apology afterwards, people really like that. And so, that went like gangbusters at XPX. And so when I went home, I was just like, okay, I'm going to start doing bad caricatures. $5 per person. You get a terrible drawing and a written apology. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
I love it so much. And it's amazing because I've had a similar experience of sitting at comic conventions and watching people walk by my booth, not even slowing down, not even casting a glance, lest I make eye contact with them. And sometimes in that misery, in that despondence, you get some pretty creative moments.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't know whether it's a self-defense thing or whether it's just desperation, but I've had the exact same experiences where I was like, oh, God, I got to do something.
Well, this is an unplanned topic, but I might as well spring it on both of you. I don't know if you saw, there was an article that came out, I think it was in The Economist, but maybe it was somewhere else. But they talked about how there's now been a couple of scientific studies about what triggers creativity. And so they specifically tested with cannabis and with cyclabin, which I think is in mushrooms, right? And they also tested boredom. And big shocker, guess what worked the best for triggering creativity? It is boredom. It's boredom.
Wow.
Yep.
And I was so amazed by that, but I also was not shocked by it. Because I think about all the times where I'm forcing boredom as a way to generate ideas, and my God, it works for me. Do you two find the same thing?
Yeah. I try to at least once every month take like a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon and lock myself not in my office, but actually in my partner's office. So it's like a kind of a foreign space for me. Yeah. And I'll clear off about 4 or 5 hours and I will just sit there. And the only thing I have with me is a notebook that I can write notes on. And I have this rule, and I think it's a Neil Gaiman rule of you can do nothing or you can write. And that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh my gosh. Almost like a cross parent, right? Or a parent who is cross with you, who says, all right, you got two choices. You can sit and write, or you can do nothing. Yeah. That's your two choices.
Yeah. But like,
make a good choice, and then storms off. You know?
I don't take my phone or anything like that.
Smart.
Like it's
smart.
I ground myself for the afternoon, and then I just come up with ideas.
And then describe for everybody the first half an hour, the first 45 minutes, the first 60 minutes of that. Like what's happening with Kevin in that first chunk of time.
Well, if I don't fall asleep, then
Yep. Right there with
then I will. Then I'll just come up with the dumbest ideas in the world. You know what I mean? But like as I sit there long enough, and it's got to be more than a couple of hours. You know what I mean? Like 3 hours is kind of the minimum, at least for me, to like start getting to like the really good stuff. And it sounds excruciating, but it's actually really nice if you have like the right mentality for it. And then, the longer I sit there, the ideas either get weirder or they get better. Sometimes both,
Yeah.
Have you ever had something like that? But talking to both of you, where, and I've had this last couple of weeks, I sit down and I cannot make sparks happen for nothing. And same thing that this happened just a few days ago, where I just was trying to make something, and then all of a sudden one thing came into fruition, and it was like, oh, that's not crap. And then it was like I literally threw my phone to the other side of the office. Mm-hmm. It's like, because when it starts, you got to follow that wherever it leads. And before I knew it, I had written 2 pages of pretty good stuff, and it was like, oh, okay, I can write after all. I'm constantly proving to myself year after year that I actually can write. Are you like that sometimes too? Almost like taking that gambler metaphor and flipping it around, where all of a sudden you hit a hot streak and you're like, I got to keep writing, baby. I'm hot tonight. And you just keep going and going. Do you do that?
Oh, yeah. 100%. 100%.
Yeah.
What about you, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's almost like this is maybe a bad visual metaphor from my specific childhood. But when I was a kid, there was a storm drain across the street from my house. And sometimes what I would do is I would take a stick and I would cut a little carved path in the dirt, and the water would go from a trickle to get bigger and bigger. And like very quickly it would happen. And I find that my creativity is the same kind of thing, that like once one idea breaks through writer's block, all of a sudden it's like water carving through dirt. It's like it suddenly becomes a much greater flow for me. And what happens when that happens, I know to just sit with it, because I can get weeks of writing done in a very small amount of time.
And just like all of your ideas, it all ends up down in the drain. Folks, you've been listening to ComicLab,
the show about existentialism,
the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Hey, everybody, if you like fatalism, you'll love this week's episode. Here we go.
I just love going on people's podcasts and like ending it early.
Yeah. It's a good bit.
Well, so let's talk about this creativity. Kevin, you're allowed into a pocket dimension, right? It's just Kevin in a pocket dimension. There's no phone calls. There's no emails. There's nobody bothering you. There's no work that has to be done.
So far.
What do you choose to do in that pocket dimension?
With the idea that time works differently. In other words, you're going to be gone there for a month, maybe, but here on Earth, only gone for a second. So nobody even misses you.
Holy shit.
You've got no strings. You just go out into the world for a month, no strings.
Wow. I have access to all of my like creative resources and stuff.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. No. In this created environment, you can eat if you want. You can sleep if you want. You can do all the things that make Kevin happy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I was just picturing a white void, and it was just like you can just hang out there for as long as you want. And I'm like, why would I want to do that?
Let's make it creepy. It's a white void. You're totally naked in the white void. There you go. Let's make it creepy.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Cool. No. That's a great question. What I would do, I would actually probably do animation, if I'm being completely honest with myself. Yeah, because animation is a skill that I'm working on, but because it's so time intensive, because it's so time intensive, I just find that I don't have enough time to dedicate to it. And so like to have like a little pocket dimension where I could sit down and like make a full animated, version of my comic or something like that, I think would be a lot of fun. I also have a couple ideas for some graphic novels that I would do. So
any you care to share with us?
I have a time travel comedy that I've been working on for a long time. Yeah. And again, it's one of those things that's just like, that's such a huge, undertaking in terms of like time and commitment. And like, I got a full-time job. So, Well,
let me tell you,
that's all I can do.
As somebody who started a story that's probably going to take me 1,000 pages to finish, what do you personally think is stopping you from starting it? Is it the pain of like you wouldn't be able to finish it, or is it the pain that you might start it in the wrong way?
It's just that I wouldn't have the time to finish it,
Yeah.
I do noodle on it. I have an outline, I have like character profiles and things like that. Right. I haven't actually sat down to like draw any characters or anything like that, but it's just one of these things where I was just like, if I'm going to go down this road, I want to complete this. And so, yeah, I just want to make sure that I have the time to like do it right.
Well, okay, so I want to explore this for a second because this is a fun topic.
Okay.
That to me, what I hear when you say that is that the only way that graphic novel would come out is if you had 2 years of nothing else distracting you. Am I wrong in thinking that?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what would keep you from doing it over a 20-year period slowly?
Touche, first of all. Second of all,
I didn't mean, by the way, I saw that a little bit as a mortal blow. I feel bad about that. I'm sorry.
Are you trying to, wait a minute. Are you trying to Brad Geiger me right now?
I am. No, if I was Brad Geiger, I'd be sitting across from you in a deli being totally silent where you think I'm being wise, but in my Brad Geiger interior mind, I'm like, this guy's talking so much. God, he's just talking and talking and talking. How do I get out of this? And meanwhile, you're going to interpret that as great sage wisdom from a Zen master. In the meantime, Brad's going, God damn it, this guy's yapping away.
At least the French toast is good.
No, but honestly, because I that's the realization that I had with Drive is it's going to take me 10 to 15 years to tell this, but what the hell? What else do I got to do, you know?
Yeah.
But that's as your like main focus. You know what I mean? Like
no, but when I started Drive didn't make any money for 3 or 4 years. So I was doing,
I'm not even talking about financially. I'm just talking about time wise. You know what I mean? Like
I did it on Saturdays.
Okay, fair enough.
Kevin, why can't you be more like Dave?
That's not what I'm trying to say.
No, this is great. This is great.
Because I want more Kevin in the world. So I'm trying to say, like, I'm basically chalking out how we could solve this mental block of it. I need 2 solid years to work on this.
Right.
Which we all have, by the way. By the way, there's another comic idea that I have that I very much am holding back on because I'm like, I don't have the time. The truth is, I have the time. I just have to do it in small chunks, you know?
Yeah. I mean, one of the mental blocks is that if I were to do it over the next 20 years, I feel like the first page would be, completely different from the last page in terms of style, in terms of, technical skill and whatnot. Yep. And so what I want to do is like one discrete story, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I don't know, like that's a mental block for me.
By the way, that's a totally fair mental block. And it's true because even a decade on into Drive now, my first pages drive me bonkers because I'm like, to me, it feels so vastly different than what I'm drawing now. And it makes me, and tell me if you guys feel this way too. One of the reasons among a myriad reasons I'm jealous of Jeff Smith is that somehow he made the first pages of Bone feel like the last pages of Bone, even though I know technically he got much better over that decade in drawing Bone. Somehow it still feels like the exact same comic in those first pages as page 842.
I would be willing to bet that he feels differently.
You're probably right.
I bet you're probably right. Can see all, and by the way, that's a good lesson for all of us to take. Is that we can see all the warts and all of the inconsistencies and all of that stuff. We can't, but he can.
I think part of it also is that he was very smart in terms of like the character design. The bones are so simple in terms of their character design. I think it comes from his animation background. He's like, if I'm going to be drawing these characters for over, 1,500 pages or whatever, like they should be fairly simple. And so, I think it's about just kind of like realizing that you're going on that marathon and to make the run as easy as possible for you along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics. Well, let me ask you a totally different question, changing gears. You come from a very professional dealing with swimming in the waters of social media. For your personal cartooning, what is your social media strategy? What outlets do you find work for you? What do you make sure to hit up every time you have a new comic? What do you find is not working or is worth avoiding? What for you basically is advice you might give to another cartoonist on social media?
My advice is actually really similar to the advice that you guys give on the show, and that's to own a home base and then to syndicate everywhere. And there's an acronym for it, which is POSSE, which is post, own, site, syndicate everywhere.
And I like that.
I think that's really all you can do these days. You know what I mean? Because platforms are so in flux all the time, and so like all you can do is to just own your own space and then just be everywhere your audience is.
I have to pause you for a second. What was that acronym? Where did that come from? POSSE? Post, own, site, syndicate everywhere. Is that something you came up with, or is that an industry?
No, I wish. No, it's where did I see it first? I think Cory Doctorow brought it to my attention first. Cory Doctorow, the sci-fi author and online activist.
And old school web cartoonist. He's one of the first web cart. I looked this up for a book that I had written, and I think he, if not one of the first, maybe even the first. And it was like, if I remember right, I got to check my facts, but I think it was like posted on a CompuServe message board or something. It was early stuff. But yeah, he's got deep webcomics.
Wasn't the title something like Buffalo or something, or
Where the Buffalo Roam?
Yeah. But anyway, Cory, that's funny that you should mention Cory Doctorow, because he came up multiple times with Brad and I this week. What a great thinker Cory is. But yeah, so POSSE, post on your own site, syndicate everywhere. All right, I'm going to remember that. Thank you. So despite my desire to want to make fun of it, I will now remember it. But keep going. So you post on your own site, you syndicate everywhere. What do you find really works for you, for your specific Kevin comics?
My comics tend to do well on what we call the stream sites. At BuzzFeed, we have this philosophy of a platform is either a garden or a stream. And so a garden platform is something like Netflix, where you go, it's what you decide to consume is like a very deliberate choice. And it's all about making the nicest garden that you can. Whereas a stream site is anything with an algorithmic feed. It's like Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, like whatever. And so those platforms, the content that you want to make is stuff that requires no context, that people can, enjoy and then flip on to the next thing. And so my comics, because they have very little context, because you don't need to know who the characters are, the bird doesn't even have a name, it tends to do better on stream sites. So like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, places like that.
Right.
Yeah. Reddit. You're tearing it up on Reddit.
Actually, and I'll tell you this. I've been having surprising success on TikTok.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. So TikTok has introduced a photo component, basically, where you can upload just still images, and it'll put them together in like an auto-scrolling,
right, like a slider,
auto-scrolling slider, right? And you can stop the slider, you can, slide back and forth, but if you don't touch it, it will slide every 2 seconds or whatever. And so I just on a lark just started putting up my comics panel by panel, which I don't normally do anywhere else. I usually put up just all 4 panels in a still image. And they've been doing well, knock on wood. The last couple have been doing pretty well on TikTok. It helps to use hashtags that are trending. Like my last comic was about AI, and so it got a lot of traction because people were arguing about AI in the comments and whatnot. And so, but I say don't count out TikTok.
Well, can I ask you, because now I'll be honest, and Brad knows this, about 3-4 weeks ago, I uninstalled TikTok on my phone just because, frankly, I'm happier now without it on my phone. But I do actually want to install it again now to go look at your stuff. Where could people find your stuff on TikTok? Because I want to see this specific approach.
On TikTok, I'm just at the Kevin McShane.
At the Kevin McShane.
I'm K McShane everywhere else.
Oh, who is the
McShane
Kevin that
Twitter,
stole this
Instagram.
from you?
I know, motherfucker. Yeah.
Talk to me, Kevin, about dancing underneath those TikTok
God.
videos. I would not have thought to do that.
I know.
I would have. You actually look perfectly great doing it. I would have looked dumb. You pull this off, and I want to know everything about it. Where the idea come from, and does it get traction?
Before he does, let's explain to people what it is. And Kevin, correct me if I have this wrong. You post a comic wholesale on Instagram, at least as I see it.
Yeah.
But then you do a second post on that same day, kind of within the same hour, of that same comic, but there's sort of a split screen approach with you dancing and narrating, but not narrating the dialogue necessarily of the comic, narrating the thoughts around the comic, right? Is that the best way to describe it? Yeah. How did this idea come about, to Brad's point? How did you decide to execute this? And also, what is the reaction to this?
Well, just like everything else in my life, it was born out of cynicism. And what it was, because I work at BuzzFeed, I saw that Instagram was going to start pushing Reels. And so as we all saw, our engagement tanked unless we were making video. And I saw other comics creators who were just posting their comics as a slideshow and video. And I was like, that's not really that interesting. So I was like, what can I do in order to get people to stop scrolling long enough that they'll actually read the comic? And I was just like, I don't know, what if I just fucking dance underneath it, And so I did that, and it actually got some traction, which is to my chagrin because I fucking hate it.
Oh, really?
I hate doing it. Yes, I hate it. Everybody, I mean, if you look at the videos, I have a big smile on my face. That's a shit-eating grin because it's like, fuck you, Instagram, for making me do this. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Is there a danger of you becoming known as the dancing cartoonist?
Oh, I hashtag dancing cartoonist. So I mean, whatever. It's fine. You got to do what you got to do in order to get attention. But it really was born out of cynicism.
I mean, it really is the algorithm at some point pointing a 6-shooter at our feet going, dance, boy.
Literally.
That's what we have to do. Yeah. But so you found that has increased your interactions, or has it just maintained the level?
It's maintained.
Okay.
Yeah. And it seems that now, just recently since the new year, it seems that they've adjusted the algorithm yet again. So that way now Reels are getting roughly the same engagement as photo posts. I think they're kind of swinging the pendulum kind of back in the other direction because people were so upset about how much they were focusing on Reels.
Right.
Yeah. So now along those lines, we're seeing you do all of this different stuff, right? And it's almost like watching a plate spinner, right? Trying to keep all these things up. And also like your job at BuzzFeed, right? Which is something that takes obviously an insane amount of attention. What would your ideal career in cartooning look like?
Oh God. For me, it would just be my ideal career would be being a independent creative.
Yeah.
I have so many different media and so many different stories and whatnot that I like to work in. I would love to have a situation where either through patronage or subscriptions or what have you, that I could sustain myself to make video and to make comics and to, do animation and to, do live comedy,
Yeah.
I don't know if there's
I
don't know if there's a name for that.
We haven't even mentioned your improv roots and
Exactly.
and podcasting too. I mean, you're kind of a Renaissance person in that you do an awful lot of creative things.
Yeah. And I don't know if there's really a name for that or if there's a kind of a specific career path for that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, without immense success, kind of there's no, and by that I mean like you were saying, you sort of have to have a big success in order to do multiple polymath creative jobs. It seems to be the case that the world mostly rewards picking a path, sticking with it, and then plowing that field constantly. That's a bad phrase. I don't know why I said plowing that field. That sounds terrible.
If there's one thing If there's one thing Dave knows about, it's plowing. Folks, you've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics
and plowing,
making a living from comics.
Talk about it. There's no way that word doesn't sound terrible when you say it. Plow. God damn it! I just wanted to say working, doing work. Now I'm fixing. This is terrible. I'm literally sweating in my hoodie now. So your ideal career is, I mean, to be honest, if I was being honest about my ideal career, it would be kind of like having a mangaka system where I had 4 or 5 people working with me for me, where I'm like, guys, this week we're going to do a short video, and there's 2 people there that know how to do camera work. There's another person there that does editing. We bang it out, blah, 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 blah. And then next week, all right, we're doing a bunch of cartooning work. Honestly, that seems tremendously fun. But I only know of like 4 or 5 people in the entire world that have that kind of a job or a system. It just doesn't, but I share, what I'm getting at is I share your desire for that kind of thing to exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, really, if we're being honest about it, the only people that have that kind of life are like an echelon of like YouTubers. You know what I mean? There's like 4 or 5 that basically they have a couple people working for them and they get to do whatever they want that week. There's
this theory in media right now that as the creator economy evolves, what we're going to see is kind of a loss of the middle class, and you're basically either, so like media in the future is going to be either semi-anonymous, TikTok videos, or creators who are basically like little boutique media companies,
right?
And you're going to kind of lose that kind of like middle class of people who can't quite get to one end and are kind of in a way stuck with at the other.
That's incredibly interesting. So what is the thinking behind that? Like what removes that middle class? Just the reward systems for monetizing for the megastars? Is that the idea?
Yeah. It's basically the fact that there's way more creators who want to make a living than there is money to support them. So what happens is the money kind of pools and favors the high performers.
Right. And in the meantime, because that overall population base of wannabe creators is so high, they will basically undercut one another in terms of offering things for free in order to become an audience size of which they can then jump in on that pooled money. So I see what you mean. So you basically end up with 2 very divergent classes, a mass of people who are performing for little or no money, and then a very small sort of super megastar group. Yeah, Brad, you wanted to jump in. Go ahead, sorry.
Well, and that brings us right to the topic of AI art and AI writing, artificial intelligence. And I've been watching with great delight your comics on artificial intelligence. How do you think that fits into there? Where do you think AI art and writing is going? Is it gonna turn out to be a good thing, a bad thing? Is it a disaster? Talk to us about AI.
I don't even know. Like, honestly, I don't even know. I mean, I'm just as clueless as you guys are. Like, I'm not even thinking about the short terms of like, will AI replace artists? I'm thinking more like, what is the world going to look like in 10 years? Like when AI just does everything, One thing that I will say, though, is that, part of the early debate on AI is the idea that a lot of these models are being trained on our artwork. And so I'm 100% behind this movement that I've heard called vegan data, if you will. Okay. And it's data that is basically consensual, that people have opted in to have used as a training model, and I think that is an important conversation. That's kind of the first conversation that we need to have. But unfortunately, the technology is just outpacing us. Like we can't. We're barely figuring out the internet. Like, and then along comes AI. I will say this: there is also my personal theory that once a generative video AI comes on board, if we ever let that link up with a recommendation algorithm like TikTok, it's over.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Because
you're absolutely right.
AI will defer to one of 10 types of videos and keep feeding that millions of variations to you of that. I'm going to get so many van life videos that are AI generated. It's going to be ridiculous.
Yeah. But you know, if the end game of the attention economy is to have you glued to your screen or your device or whatever, and AI's job is to make that content that appeals to you, then you link those two up. And I mean, it's going to be like WALL-E. Like, we're going to be in our big chairs with our big gulps watching TV 24 hours a day, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, because there's no reason to take your eye off the screen.
And frankly, the only way to win
compelling.
would be to completely remove yourself from that ecosystem entirely. You know, that's, as a human, the only way to win is to take yourself out.
You saying that you're going to go off into the mountains?
Let me just say, I got a cabin in the woods and I got some plans. I've been planting corn. I've got my own way of living.
Yeah, we saw those. Yeah, listen, I saw those tomatoes you planted during COVID. You better stay on the grid.
Let's just say Dave Kellett's been doing a lot of plowing. Let's just put it that way.
Oh, good Lord.
Folks, you've been listening to ComicLab, the show about comics.
I with AI, Kevin, I don't think you heard this because the show hasn't released yet, but I genuinely tried to use AI to generate ideation in terms of sketches, and found it to be nonsensical in terms of what I realized, and I tried to explain this to Brad, and I don't know if I did a good enough job. It's my fault, not Brad's fault, but I knew what I wanted in my brain. My artistic mind knew what I wanted. And I was basically just trying to get the AI to draw what I wanted. And only after 40 failed attempts did I realize I can just take a pencil out and draw this. I know what I want. And granted, AI will get better, and it's in part a communication failure between my human brain and that AI interface. So I grant you that's going to get better, and that process is going to get smoothed out. But the truth of it is, for ideation, I know what I want to draw. I know what I want to create, and I don't need AI. So even the version that I thought, oh, well, AI will be useful for established artists to help come up with 40 versions of the thing that we know we want to draw, I'm no longer convinced that that's the case.
So let's try a thought experiment, right?
Yeah.
So let's say you have a strip that you have written and you want to draw it. You lay it out, and all you do is you just put like circle here for Sheldon, circle here for like the other characters. Then you feed it into an AI, and the AI inks the strip, colors it, letters it, and you're done. Would you use that? Would you do that?
God,
and it looks just like your strip.
Yeah.
By the way, none of that is impossible on the trajectory that we're going. Wow, what a thought, Brad. You want to answer that first? Because I'm gonna dissolve into this puddle of goo over here while I think about this.
And this comes with the conflict right now. Where I am mentally is I am incredibly against AI art and writing, mainly because of that opt-in, opt-out stuff. I don't like the way they're doing it. I don't mind it as a concept, but I don't like the way they're doing it. So right now I'm very much not only like in an angry way, not only angry at AI, but anybody who's trying to defend it, I immediately start to think that they must be suspect for some reason. Sure. What are they, what's in, going on with this person, which is, probably unfair. But having said that, everything you just, I'll be completely honest with you. Everything you just said, the obvious answer is you'd be dumb to say no. If it looks exactly like you did it, boy, how dumb would you be to say no? It's just, and by the way, it's one of those John Henry things that if you do say no, you're putting a knife to your own throat, because your competition's out there going to be working 100 times faster than you. And no one cares that you did it by hand. They just want to read. Again, it comes back to that streaming thing. They just want to be entertained for 5 seconds and scroll on to the next thing. And that's where you're caught.
And here's the problem with that, too, is that when you can almost instantaneously generate a Kevin comic, a Brad comic, a Dave comic, at the click of a button, you could, in a future social media atmosphere, do A/B testing of which punchline works better, which setup works better, which one's going to end up in the book. Because you could have 5 different of the same comic working for you in A/B testing online. I mean, it just becomes At what point does the joy of existence stop being enough of an impetus to make us want to create art? You know what I mean? Like that, I find joy in drawing, physically drawing a thing. I find joy, and then at the end of it going, oh, I made that thing. But at what point does AI rob us even of the joy of making the thing, you know? That's why I'm dissolving into goo with that question.
And that's the whole thing. It's just like, yeah, like the whole, that's the thing, the whole, vegan data thing, that'll be solved. The automation thing, that's not going away. So, like what it really is like what we're getting at is like these kind of like fundamental questions of like, what does it mean to be human?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, my continuing anger about this is, you know how people used to joke about like, I was promised a flying car and all I got was, texting or whatever it is.
Yeah.
For me, AI, like I was promised really good protein folding and like cancer curing drugs. Yeah. I thought that's what AI was going to be working on, was cancer curing drugs and possible molecular combinations. Instead, it's like, you know what? I'm going to steal cartoonist work. That's what AI is going to do. Well, I'm like, damn it, this was not what I was promised with AI.
Oh my God. Two things ripped from the headlines from my social media feed today. The first thing I read when I woke up this morning, I think it was on Reddit. Did you folks see this? That an AI medical software supposedly, and I was bleary-eyed, so I might be getting facts wrong, cured some kind of liver cancer or came up with a drug. Came up with a drug to address liver cancer or something. You get the idea. In 10 minutes, it came up with a drug that they've been working on for years. And it just was, boom, here it is. I mean, it's literally Jetsons stuff, push button, blop, it spits it out. That was this morning on Reddit.
Good, because that's what we were promised, like cancer curing drugs. That's great. Not stealing the job of a storyboard artist that works for Sony Animation in Culver City. Like, that's not what we were promised. I did not want that.
Here's the other ripped from the headlines that I just tweeted about earlier today. I'm not going to give his name. It looks like a piece of work, but this writer clearly doing some kind of a clickbait opinion piece. Here's the headline and the subhead. You remember? You ready for this? Here's the headline. AI spells trouble for creatives, and it's about time, too. Here's the subhead. Machines that can write and paint are a welcome rebuff to the prestige enjoyed by artistic types. Listen to this. It hit me like a ton of bricks. For years, they've been trying to pay us an exposure. Now, exposure is too much. Yep. Don't even give them the exposure. Too much prestige for you. You don't get money. You don't get exposure, you don't get prestige, you just sit there and draw and stop when I tell you to.
I mean, Kevin, are we sort of in the rage against the dying of the light stage of art creation in terms of like where things are headed?
I don't even know, man. Like don't come to me for answers. I don't
know. Well, listen, along those lines, I want to say how much of an absolute joy it's been to catch up with you again.
Oh my God, this went so fast.
You are absolutely one of my favorite people, and I love being able to talk to you and talk comics with you specifically. So, Kevin McShane, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, guys. It is always a joy and a pleasure. And I just want to say that you've been listening to ComicLab, the show about making comics and making a living of
Kevin,
comics.
This is not the end of the show. Stop it. No, you don't get to do that part. I will say, though, you want to go check out Kevin Comics. That's Kevin comics.com. And Kevin's last name is spelled McShane, McShane. You can check him out on multiple different TikTok, Instagram, Reddit, all sorts of things.
All over the place.
Kevin, you are a fantastic human being. Thank you for joining us, my friend.
Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure.
Doggone it, Kevin, this is my job. That's because I am the one who gets to say you've been listening to ComicLab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my friend Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And my good friend David Kellett, the co-director of the comics documentary Stripped and the cartoonist of Sheldon Comics at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And a shout out and a thank you to our friend Kevin, who we were intending to have on just for a little bit and ended up delightfully filling up a full hour. So thank you, Kevin, over at kevincomics.com. And ComicLab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode. Also, if you are one of these scores, nay, dozens of scores, hundreds of people listening to us on Spotify, take a moment when we get to the end of the show, go over, give us a 5-star review over on Spotify. I can't tell you how much that has been helping us. We've been really doing great on Spotify, and mainly it's because of people like you giving us that big review.
And I have to tell you, because of your kind reviews on Spotify, I like with Brad, go over there right now and give us a quick 5-star review. Because of that, we are the #1 comics podcast above Marvel, DC, HBO Max's comics podcast. So thank you for that. We appreciate it so much. And I will say Comic Lab is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So I'll go ahead and say that twice, patreon.com/comiclab.
Dave, I think we need to put this whole thing to rest. This whole idea of plowing the fields, it does sound a little bit weird. I'm gonna suggest perhaps we change that to a different idiom.
Sure.
So for now on, instead, I want you to say "working my street corner." That's what I want you to say instead.
Oh God!
All right.
Oh God!
I just want you to say, "I'm standing out here working my corner of the street." All right. That's going to be much better for you.
Can I tell you? I already got the panic sweat from just saying plowing the field. Now you say working my corner of the street. I'm like, my pits are instantly sweating. God, you really enjoy making your friend uncomfortable. Oh.
I really do. It is one of the few joys I have left.
1-800 no thanks. # unsubscribe. Do not want.